This is an exclusive bonus short from Lena Simone's Blood and Stone short story series. Enjoy your sneak peek into the next story, Sand and Stone. Gale of Tales presents New Threads, sort of.
Sunlight from the late summer sky burst through the tall windows of Delaney's new apartment, scattering across the hardwood floors in bright, dancing patches. A faint smell of fresh paint mingled with the soft sweetness of a candle glowing on her coffee table, filling the space with something rare, possibility. She finally felt like she was where she needed to be. Washington, D.C. was an unfamiliar place. It was loud and alive, like New York in some ways, but it was new. This move felt different than her last. This time, the change felt intentional. Her lips curved into a smile as she leaned on the window frame. Here, maybe, she could build something closer to the life she wanted. And she had Kieran with her. Kieran sat curled into the armchair opposite a small gray sofa, with one leg tucked beneath her. "I'm just saying," she said, "the Smithsonian? That's no small thing." Delaney leaned back, the faintest smile played on her lips. "I know. For the first time in years, I feel proud. Like I'm finally doing something that matters." Kieran lifted her iced coffee in a mock toast. "You should be. And cheers to your inspiration and guide. That's me, of course. No way I'm letting you bask in all that glory alone," she added, sipping her coffee. Delaney shot her a look. "You just didn't want me wandering around aimlessly adopting strays. And you're new to the city too, so you're not a guide." Kieran grinned. "I meant in life. But also, yeah, you're right." Their laughter filled the room, a familiar rhythm that brought the comfort of home to the new city. Later, they wandered to the cafe across the street from her apartment. The August heat pressed close, and the smell of fresh pastries and sweetness lingered in the air. And then, he walked in. He had sharp blue eyes and dark waves that fell into them, as if on purpose. A smirk, subtle but loaded with something unspoken, curved his chiseled jaw. When his gaze met Delaney's, the noise of the cafe dulled, and the world narrowed to that connection. She felt something quick and magnetic as their shoulders brushed, like heat sparking where their skin collided. Flustered, she stepped aside so quickly, she fell into him. "Sorry," she murmured, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. His hand lingered a moment on her arm, steadying her. "No need to apologize," he said. He was so close, and his voice was so deep, she could feel it coursing through her. Then his smirk deepened. "But if you wanted to be this close to me, you could have just asked." Her eyes flicked up, startled. I didn't mean..." "Yes," he interrupted, deliberately. Delaney blinked. "I'm sorry?" He tilted his head. "You have it." His gaze held hers, steady and amused. Delaney blinked again, genuinely confused. "Have what?" His smile edged sharper, eyes glinting. "Permission," he said, his voice was now as smooth as velvet. Then, leaning just slightly in, he added, "Unless you prefer I make the next move." His scent caught her off guard. It was like warm cedar, but laced with something darker, spiced and intoxicating. It swirled through her senses, pulling her in before she could stop herself. Delaney smirked. Light and sweet, she shot back without missing a beat, surprising even herself. One of his brows lifted, amused, but he didn't say a word. She let her smile deepen just a touch, then continued. "Before talking about making moves, you should probably at least know how I take my coffee." He chuckled low, the sound was rich and unhurried. "Well," he said, his eyes still holding hers, "I'll remember. But now I'll never taste a cup of coffee again without thinking of you. Though I can't say that's a bad thing." His smirk slipped into a genuine grin, quick, but telling. Then, he turned toward the barista, luckily for Delaney, just in time to miss the heat rising in her cheeks. Where did that come from? She wondered. Normally she second-guessed every word, but somehow that slipped out smooth and fearless, like it belonged to someone braver than she was. Kieran arched her brow as they ordered. "Okay, who was that?" "I have no idea," Delaney said, still watching the stranger. "You never met him before?" Kieran asked, looking at her sister. "So, mystery neighbor, table for two?" Delaney had finally stopped staring at him. "Shut up, Kieran," she said, shaking her head. She was focusing on the menu, harder than she ever looked at a menu in her entire life. They stepped back outside, lattes and pastries in hand, just in time to see him again. This time, he didn't just walk by. As he passed, he extended a to-go cup toward her. Delaney froze for half a second before taking it. The label scrawled in black marker read, "Name, beautiful. Blend, light and sweet." She smiled, "Thank you, but I wasn't expecting you to actually buy me a coffee." He grinned and said, "Your move." With a wink, he turned and walked in the direction of her building, without looking back. Kieran stopped mid-sip, nearly choking on her iced coffee. "Oh my God," she whispered, eyes wide. "He actually bought you a coffee." Delaney stared down at the cup in her hand, heat rushing once more to her cheeks. Nope. Kieran cut her off, grinning like she'd won the lottery. "Mystery neighbor. Table for two. It's happening." Delaney rolled her eyes, trying to mask the way her pulse had kicked up. But she knew the ghost of his touch, and the sound, and feel of his voice, would linger far longer than she was willing to admit. They walked around for a while, sipping coffee, and getting to know the local shops, before eventually heading back. The sound of guitars from street performers, and even the loud conversation from sidewalk tables they passed, didn't grab Delaney's attention. Her eyes seemed to be focused on something in the distance. She slowed her pace after she looked behind her, and realized she was steps ahead of Kieran. She was still distracted. She didn't know why the interaction in the coffee shop had such an effect on her. Kieran caught the glance she threw over her shoulder and smirked. "Still thinking about your mystery neighbor?" Delaney rolled her eyes. "You're so annoying." You are." "What?" "Don't say not," Kieran said, drawing out the words. "Because if you were about to say you're not, just know that is exactly what people say when they are." They turned the corner toward Delaney's block, and Kieran gestured toward her building. "You do realize if he lives here, you're going to be running into him all the time, right?" Gasping playfully, Kieran added, "Maybe he's even on your floor." "You are the worst," Delaney said, chuckling. "But you love me," Kieran responded quickly. As they reached her door, she keyed in the entry code. "I do," she said, smiling. "Thanks again. I needed this. I think I have everything together now. I should get some rest though, I've got a big day tomorrow." Kieran's smile softened. "You're welcome. Get your beauty rest. But don't worry. You got this." They hugged, quick and tight, before Kieran headed off down the block toward her own apartment, just around the corner. Kieran didn't turn around as she shouted, "Call me tomorrow." Delaney put her hand in the air in response, and continued inside. Standing in her apartment doorway, Delaney leaned against the frame before closing it behind her. She told herself tomorrow was all that mattered, her first day, the fresh start she'd been craving. But when she pressed her forehead lightly against the door, his voice slipped back into her mind, and she could have sworn she still smelled his scent. Her stomach fluttered unexpectedly, and she shook her head, laughing softly at herself. Kieran would never let her live it down if she could see her now. She shook it off, pushing away from the door. "Get it together. This isn't a rom-com. Tomorrow is a big deal." The rest of the day passed without incident. Its small routines and distractions kept her busy enough. When evening settled in, she ate, washed up, and slipped into an old oversized t-shirt. By the time she slid beneath the sheets, the steady hum of the ceiling fan was already soothing her. Curled on her side, with the blanket pulled close, she let tomorrow's nerves fade, as sleep began to take her. The next morning, she woke to soft light filtering through her curtains, casting pale lines across the walls, which somehow ignited a flutter of nerves in her chest, but it was the good kind. She showered, brushed her teeth, and dressed with intention. Black trousers, a white blouse tucked neatly at the waist, and of course, her brown leather boots. Twisting her curls into their usual loose bun, she studied her reflection and gave a small nod. "Professional, but still me," she said aloud, testing the words with a faint smile. She pressed her palms against the edge of the dresser to check her lipstick in the mirror, then stood back, squared her shoulders, and exhaled. "This is it," she paused briefly, and continued with practiced confidence. "No more cubicles. Focus. Let's do this." With that affirmation, she grabbed her bag, her keys, and left her apartment. As Delaney stepped through the stone arch of the entranceway, the morning air brushed against her cheek, cooler than she had expected. The building loomed above her. Its facade felt both inviting and intimidating. She drew in a steadying breath, her hands balling and unclenching at her sides in a quick rhythm. "Here we go," she murmured, words meant for no one but herself. The glass doors gave way to a quiet, polished lobby. Marble floors gleamed beneath soft lighting, and the scent of fresh coffee drifted faintly from somewhere behind the reception desk. "Hi, welcome," said the woman behind it. She was medium build, with deep brown skin that seemed to catch and hold the light, and long, dark hair pulled into a sleek ponytail. Her high cheekbones and warm smile instantly eased Delaney's nerves, though only a fraction. "You must be Delaney," she said, her voice rich with warmth. "I'm Stephanie. It's a pleasure to meet you." Delaney smiled. "I am. How did you know?" she said with her hand outstretched to shake the receptionist's hand. "Pleasure to meet you as well." Stephanie stepped from behind the desk with easy confidence. "Staff hours." She smiled as she met Delaney's hand with her own. "Plus, your photo is in your file. Follow me. I'll take you to the curator." They wove through a maze of hallways, and Delaney noticed every minute detail. From the muted click of Stephanie's shoes echoing off the high ceilings, to the glass cases lining the corridors, holding artifacts from civilizations long gone. She didn't have time to stop and explore, but she caught glances of ceramic shards, bone tools, and glimmering metal fragments. She smiled, feeling like a kid in a candy store. "Incredible," she said aloud. When they reached the office, Stephanie knocked twice before opening the door. "Professor Nakamura?" He looked up from a stack of papers. Even seated, Delaney could see the broad set of his shoulders beneath his tailored suit. There was a slight hunched curve to his posture, but it was softened by the quick adjustment of his glasses. His features were sharpened by the deep, unwavering focus in his brown eyes. Delaney smiled wide, as two thoughts crossed paths in her mind simultaneously. 1. Smile, first impressions are important, and 2. He was younger than she expected him to be. "Miss Smith," he said, rising to greet her. His handshake was firm and professional. "Welcome aboard. You couldn't have joined us at a better time." Her curiosity stirred. "Really? Fantastic." "We've been working with a new contributor," Nakamura said, circling his desk to lean casually against its edge. "They've provided artifacts from ancient Egypt, objects that, if authenticated, could reshape certain interpretations of their burial and ritual practices. It will be an interesting first project. Being heavily involved in the research, you will get a detailed introduction to, and hopefully, an appreciation for, our methods. The process will be thorough." He adjusted his glasses again. "I think you'll find it fascinating." Her voice cracked, but she quickly regained a confident tone and continued, "That sounds amazing. You mentioned artifacts. What kind of pieces are we talking about?" "Several funerary items, ceremonial blades and," he paused, watching her, gauging her interest, "some smaller articles, others less abridged. According to the donor, they came from a sealed chamber in an undocumented tomb. Although, the markings on it are not standard hieroglyphics. They are unusual. We've analyzed a few pieces already, but we anticipate several more shippings." Stephanie's voice cut gently into the moment. "Sorry to interrupt, but good news, Professor. Ollie called just before Miss Smith arrived. He said the third shipment was brought to the lab this morning, and is ready for your initial review." "Excellent," Nakamura said, clapping his hands together. "Would you please show Miss Smith to her office? We have a lot to go over before we begin. This may take several months, if not more." "Of course," Stephanie replied, motioning for Delaney to follow. Delaney gave a departing nod, and turned to follow Stephanie's lead out the door. He walked back behind his desk, and began shuffling papers, looking for something. "Top drawer," Stephanie said. Nakamura opened his top drawer, and pulled out neatly folded notes. "You said to remind you that you put those there, you know, for when you lose them," the receptionist said, with a smile. "Misplaced, Stephanie, misplaced," Nakamura said, waving the notes above his head. "Great to meet you, Miss Smith. I'll be in shortly to brief you." "Oh, and welcome to the team," he yelled, just as the door was closing between them. "Ah, yes. Nothing says welcome like being shouted at," Stephanie joked, as she looked at Delaney. "You'll get used to his ways." Delaney smiled, nodding in agreement. She followed Stephanie down yet another long corridor, until suddenly, the receptionist stopped walking as if remembering something. She turned to Delaney and asked, "Before you settle into your office, would you like to take a quick look at some of the items we've already cataloged?" Delaney answered quickly and with excitement, "Absolutely, I would love that." They stepped into a small, temperature-controlled lab. The air smelled faintly of stone dust and linen, and the buzz of equipment filled the silence. More glass cases lined the walls, each holding fragments, carefully labeled with neat handwriting. The space radiated precision and reverence, and Delaney felt a flicker of awe. This was where the past was coaxed back into focus, where shards and scraps could become voices again. She smiled, thinking, this is actually her life. She had come a long way from bad coffee and cataloging useless data in a small cubicle. Stephanie gestured to one of the tables. These were recovered from the same excavation site. They've already gone through basic cleaning and stabilization. Delaney leaned in to examine the pieces. There were shards of painted ceramic, arranged like pieces of an unsolved puzzle, and bands of faded cobalt and ochre, forming what might once have been the curve of an offering bowl. Beside them, a narrow blade rested under glass. Its bronze surface was dulled with age, but faint etchings still marked its hilt, spirals so fine, they were clearly deliberate. Her fingers twitched at her side, an instinctive urge to trace the patterns. She resisted, instead letting her eyes absorb every line and fracture. There was a story here, buried in clay and metal, that hadn't been told in thousands of years. As she studied the blade, a subtle vibration seemed to stir the air, not loud, not even physical, but a shift, as though the room exhaled around her. The hairs along her arms prickled. For a fleeting second, she heard something like a low purr under the thrum of the machines, a sound that vanished the moment she tried to focus on it. The feeling brought her immediately back to Renwick. She could almost see the glowing stone, and feel the amulet pulsing through her veins, and hear the guttural screams of the Draugr, Vidar's roar, and Solvay's blade striking down with unflinching precision, and, "They'll go to authentication next." Stephanie's voice pulled her back to the present, and she cleared her throat, willing her pulse to slow. Stephanie continued speaking, her voice perfectly normal, unaware of anything strange. "Most likely funerary items, though the professor thinks some of the markings are unusual." Delaney nodded, but her mind caught on that word, unusual. Nakamura also used it. She hadn't even been truly exposed to the artifacts, yet she could agree. If there was one thing she learned this year, it was to trust her instincts. And she knew, whatever she'd felt, wasn't ordinary. Stephanie smiled, breaking her reverie. "I'll show you to your office now." As they left the lab, Delaney gave one last glance over her shoulder at the blade and the fractured bowl, and a chill ran down her spine. "This is your office," Stephanie said, opening the door, motioning for her to step in. Delaney walked in the room, but her mind was still in the lab. She couldn't shake the feeling she had. Her blood was still vibrating. Was it excitement? She knew better, but she tucked all that came with that away, at least long enough to respond. "Thank you so much, Stephanie. I think I have everything I need for the moment, but I am sure I will be running to you for help at some point," she said, setting her bag on the desk, forcing a smile, hiding her unease. "Of course. Don't even think about hesitating. If you need me, press *01. I usually answer on the second ring. Unless you're the professor, then I answer right away," Stephanie said with a wink, closing the door. Delaney sat in the chair and grabbed her phone out of her bag. I need to call Kieran," she said aloud. "No," she thought, dropping her hands to her lap. She spoke aloud once more, "My first day, and I'm going to call my big sister 2 seconds in, because I have an odd feeling." "Straighten up." She put the phone back into her bag and looked out the window, then toward her office door, feeling a mix of emotions. For the first time since arriving in DC, she was beginning to wonder, is this the job of her dreams, or was she being catapulted straight into destiny's plan? That evening, the drive home felt longer than it should have. Her mind was replaying every moment of the day. It was overwhelming, scary, and yet, more rewarding than anything she has done in a while. She pulled into a drive-thru, too distracted to think about cooking, and left with large fries, a cheeseburger, and a medium soda. By the time she reached her apartment, exhaustion had draped itself over her shoulders, heavy and insistent. She was tired, but it felt good coming from a productive day. She dropped her bag by the door, kicked off her shoes, and sat cross-legged on her bed with her dinner spread out before her. Her phone rested on the comforter, and she stared at it for a long moment, debating. Finally, she grabbed a fry, threw it in her mouth, and pressed Kieran's name. Her sister picked up on the third ring. "Well, survived your first day?" "Barely," Delaney said with a soft laugh. "I felt a bit of imposter syndrome, I can't lie. I mean, I know I'm qualified, but working with things so delicate and important is intimidating. But so far, my coworkers are great." "That's a good sign," Kieran said. Delaney continued, "They were so accommodating. Stephanie is making my life so much easier, and the curator is younger than I expected, but incredibly intense. Not in a dramatic way, but..." Kieran chimed in, "Like intellectually?" Delaney replied, "Yes, exactly. Overall though, everyone was very welcoming. I was briefed today on my first project. Egyptian artifacts from an unopened tomb, which is, well, obviously amazing. I feel a butt coming." Kieran interjected again. Delaney cut back in, unfazed. "But Kier, I saw a few of the pieces they have already processed. It felt different. Like, more than just work. Like something bigger is coming." There was silence on the other end before Kieran replied, her voice steady, carrying that familiar blend of warmth and authority. "Laney, being around all that history could have triggered PTSD or something. But trust your gut, just don't get in your own way. Don't let fear or second-guessing trip you before you even stand." Delaney swallowed, her chest loosening just a little. "Yeah, I needed to hear that. Of course, that's what I'm here for. I actually expected you to call me earlier," Kieran said. "Now eat that gross processed food I'm sure you grabbed instead of cooking, binge watch something on Netflix, and enjoy your win. You have successfully completed day 1 of your new path. Tomorrow will come fast, and before you know it, today is a memory, so enjoy the moment. You know, sometimes your dramatics are appreciated," Delaney said with a smile, keeping to herself that she was seconds away from calling Kieran immediately in her office this afternoon, and that she was literally describing the rest of her evening. "You think?" Kieran said sarcastically. They laughed, and talked a little longer until sleep began tugging at the edges of her mind. After hanging up, Delaney puffed her pillows, laid her head down, and let her mind drift, as she closed her eyes. Sleep came gently at first, wrapping her in its quiet embrace. Then, in the middle of the night, she suddenly began tossing from right to left, with her hands grasping at the sheets, and her breathing erratic. In her dream, she was in a stretch of endless sand. The sky was too bright, and lit by twin burning lights that hovered like judgment. The ground beneath her was shifting, and something vast was moving toward her at an alarming speed. Then a low, pulsing hum sank into her bones. She tried to move, but her body wouldn't obey. The sand rippled, and the earth cracked. And just as the ground threatened to split open beneath her, Delaney woke, with her heart hammering against her chest. She looked down at her hands, and there were warm grains of sand in the crevices of her fingers, and in the sheets. Between rapid breaths, she whispered into the dark, "Something is definitely coming."
Thank you for listening with Gale of Tales. Your support means the world. If you enjoyed this sneak peek, don't forget to like, share, or drop us a comment. We love hearing your thoughts. Delaney's adventure is only just beginning, and in Sand and Stone you'll meet new faces, uncover secrets, and step into even greater mysteries. So be sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell, so you're always the first to catch the next chapter, update, or surprise reveal. For announcements, sneak previews, and more story magic, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.